Oh boy, it's the O Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host, CW. Thank you so much for listening. If you're on YouTube, make sure to hit that bell and subscribe to the podcast. Today, we are talking about the best in the women's division, both past and present. Now, I was having a brief internet conversation with a buddy of mine, shout out Hawkins, about who in the Attitude Era was the GOAT in the women's division. He made the mistake of saying that I said, nice he said, she said, or he said, that I said that Trish Stratus was the GOAT, which I did not say. I said she was one of the best to do it at the time. And that's, in large part to her training with Lita, which is why they are besties. But in my opinion, one of the great, if not the GOAT of that time, was Molly Holly. She was just the best all-around worker. She did moves that you wouldn't see in other women's division matches. But she wasn't alone. Lita, Trish Stratus definitely round out that conversation. Ivy, honestly, is one of the greatest women wrestlers to do it. Jacqueline at the time, too. Although she didn't make as big a splash as the other names I mentioned, but she was also putting in heavy work. Sable definitely can be in the conversation, and she held down the division before a lot of the other women came in and picked up the baton. So there are names that you can throw out and have a conversation about who was the GOAT in the women's division. But that got me thinking, who was the GOAT? And like I said, I think it was Molly Holly. For me, she had some of the more fun matches that I've seen. She executed a lot of moves like crazy crisp. And I've said my piece. I've given flowers to Molly Holly on this podcast, so I won't retread that. But in an effort to fill 10 minutes, let's talk about Trish Stratus, Lita, kind of where the women's division went and where it is now, and kind of who's at the top today. So Lita and Trish definitely were closing down shows back in the day. And in a time where the upper management was not treating the women's division great. Raw in the Attitude Era was basically, if a women's match was coming out, it was a couple of minutes. It was a minute and a half, 2 minutes. And if it was a segment, they were at some point stripped down to their underwear in front of everybody and then had to go backstage and go home. So their travel schedules were basically like, I need to pack a bra and panties because someone's going to snatch my clothes off, and then I have to drive to the next town. Not the greatest thing. When they were given the chance to shine, they did their best to, make the best out of like a minute and a half match. Couple that with, some people coming in and not being professional wrestlers. Like, Stacy Keibler was not a professional wrestler. She was a model. And sure, she took some bumps, but she came in there to be eye candy. A lot of people were hired to be eye candy, and then also, were training to be, wrestlers. But it never progressed to the point where I ever thought Stacy Keibler or Dawn Marie or, come on, give me another name. For some reason, I almost said Toni Storm, which is not true. Toni Storm is a current wrestler. Who was Tori Wilson? There you go. That's the other one. Even though Tori Wilson, out of like Tori, Stacy Keibler, and Dawn Marie, whoever I mentioned, Tori Wilson definitely she felt like she was training more than them. Like she actually had like ring gear that she would come out and she would want to put on matches. So I always felt like Tori Wilson was at least trying, the same way Trish Stratus was. Remember, Trish Stratus was hired just like, to be eye candy for, Test and Albert. Rest in peace, Test. Which, I mean, come on. The acronym TNA was their tag team, Test and Albert, and then they brought in Trish Stratus to kind of be their manager and usher them in. But at the time, she was learning to be a professional wrestler. So you can watch her debut when Trish Stratus comes out with Test and Albert, and track her progress as a legitimate professional wrestler to the time where she, left the company to do other things. From the day she walked in, you can watch her progress, and it's really admirable because she was back there, not back in the arena, but on her days off or whatever, training with Lita and a bunch of people to become an actual, in-ring threat, and it worked. She became great. Trish Stratus is now one of the greatest to ever do it, like I said before, and it's like I said, thanks to Lita and all the other people who trained her, and it's a great. I think they should do an episode of whatever the WWE 30 or WWE like retrospective on Trish Stratus and kind of where she started, where she ended up. Trish did a lot of work to get really, really good, and then she was putting on crazy good matches with Lita. Especially, she's gonna do great matches with Lita because they knew each other's moveset so well. They knew each other's cadence. It was just magic for them. So now, they've cleared up that era. We kind of stomped through the Diva era, which really was a strange time in the women's division. I still don't think that belt did them any justice, but there were women in that time fighting for that Diva belt who were putting on great matches. Paige, Saraya, I think her name is now. The Bellas, I'm spacing on a lot of the names in the Diva era. That's when I stopped watching, but I do remember. Oh, Natalia, obviously, who's still around. There are crazy names who had to, push through that era to now get the women's championship, where we have Charlotte and Becky and Bayley, Damage Control, Michin, Mia Yim, friggin' Piper Niven. Like, these days, if you really, really pay attention to the talent that's there, like it's hard to say who's the best and who's not. Those who get the shine, Becky, the vets right now, Becky, Bayley, Ronda, Shayna Baszler is getting a lot of buzz now too. I think they're trying to get them the tag titles at WrestleMania, but I think Rousey's hurt. But there's a crazy amount of talent in the women's division, a lot of depth. I think it's great that they have women they don't know what to do with now. They just have a roster so deep that they're basically like, so we have enough to make a match, so let's do Piper Niven versus Candice LeRae. Two talents who, don't get as much TV time, but they get some, and they're trying to get them over. Nikki Cross, another fantastic wrestler. Sarah Logan returned with as Valhalla. I mean, the depth is crazy there, and I can't wait to see what happens when Sarah Logan starts wrestling again, if she does, as Valhalla, which is going to be a spectacle in its own right. But as in terms of who's the greatest in the women's division today, I mean, it's tough. You can call out Charlotte. They keep strapping the belt to her. I think Rhea Ripley is making a case for being, on her way up. She can't be the GOAT yet. Not when, Bayley's out there. Not when Becky's out there. Not when Natalia's out there. Can we give some shine to Natalya? She's out there putting on great matches to today. She is one of the heavy vets back there. Not heavy as in weight, but she's throwing around her veteran status, definitely helping out people like Shayna Baszler backstage, training these people, letting them know what's going on. Again, she worked her way through that Divas era and made it onto this side. I think she needs a title of her own, and that's why it goes back to the women's division definitely need a weekly championship title, the same way the men have the US title and the Intercontinental Championship. Women need their own version of that, because either they're chasing, Charlotte Flair, or they're doing nothing. So they do need like a weekly championship that they can defend and get some of these women on the roster over. Anyway, who do you think is the GOAT in the women's division? Let me know in the comments. Can't wait to hear your picks. Who was the best in the past, the present, and who do you think is going to be the best in the future? Obviously, it's going to be someone like Rhea Ripley. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. Remember to hit that bell. Remember to tell a friend. And also remember that I'm your friend.
I'm your friend, but if I ever see you in the ring, I can beat you. Don't you know? Yeah.